Good morning, you're watching A News. I'm Dilek Tuna. Here are the headlines. The United States and China extend the tariff truce deadline to November. Trump reveals details of the meeting with Putin in Alaska, saying that he will not act as a broker to end the war in Ukraine. Wildfires force hundreds of people to flee their homes in northwestern Türkiye. Trade tensions between the world's two largest economies have just hit pause again. President Donald Trump has signed an executive order to extend the tariff truce with China by another 90 days.
The clock was ticking and the tariff deadline for China was looming, but President Donald Trump extended the US-China tariff truce by another 90 days. It now stretches to the 10th of November. The tax hikes had been due to expire on Tuesday at 12:01 a.m. The steep tariffs were set to climb to 145% on Chinese goods and 125% on US products. But instead, rates remain at 30% for Chinese imports and 10% for American goods for the time being. President Trump made the announcement on his Truth Social platform. During a news conference on Monday, he had said, "We'll see what happens," whilst highlighting that his relationship with Chinese President Xi Jinping was good. China said the extension would provide stability to the global economy. But analysts say it's far from smooth sailing. A senior trade official calls it a strategic pause, one that lets retailers stock up without fear of a tariff shock. Market reaction was immediate. Asia's stock markets rallied. The extension has brought breathing room for negotiations around trade imbalances, market access, national security and semiconductors. Trump has suggested that he would meet with Xi before the end of the year if a trade agreement was struck, and he says that he's getting very close.
US President Donald Trump says both Ukraine and Russia may have to give up territory to end the war. He's preparing for high-stakes talks with Vladimir Putin in Alaska later this week, calling it a feel-out session to see if peace is possible.
US President Donald Trump says that both Ukraine and Russia will need to cede territory to end the war. He made the comment ahead of his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska on Friday. Trump says he'll press Putin to end the conflict, but will not act as a broker, describing the talks as an opportunity to hear what Russia wants. Speaking at the White House on Monday, Trump called the summit a feel-out session and said he would know within the first 2 minutes if progress was possible.
There'll be some land swapping going on. I know that through Russia and through conversations with everybody, to the good, for the good of Ukraine. Good stuff, not bad stuff. Also, some bad stuff for both. So there's good and there's bad.
European leaders and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky plan to speak with Trump beforehand amid concerns Washington could push Kyiv into concessions. Zelensky has warned that concessions would only embolden Russia, accusing Moscow of preparing new offensives rather than peace.
Today there was also a report from the intelligence and military command on what Putin is counting on and what he is actually preparing for, including military preparations. He is definitely not preparing for a ceasefire or an end to the war.
The Alaska summit comes amid a wave of diplomacy on Russia's side. Putin has spoken with leaders from China, India, Brazil, while Zelensky has sought support from India and Saudi Arabia. Germany will host a virtual meeting of European leaders on Wednesday to coordinate pressure on Moscow before their call with Trump.
Preparations have already started for the Alaska meeting, although the exact location has not yet been confirmed. With security measures already being put in place, residents have expressed mixed views about the high-profile summit.
Local residents in Anchorage in Alaska have mixed views on the upcoming historic meeting between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin on Friday. The exact location has not yet been officially announced, but preparations have already begun. People living in the city say they view the day as both an opportunity and a challenge.
Well, I think it's really a fascinating opportunity for Alaska to shine in what we can do for those kind of venues. I think it's a safe venue for both the leaders to come here. We have a huge Air Force base and Army base next to Anchorage, and so I think that it's going to be a safe location for them. I think it'll also be very exciting for Alaska and for the city of Anchorage to be a part of something like that. I think it's fairly historic.
I think it's an opportunity for us to demonstrate against Trump when he's here. We spend a lot of time far away trying to send messages to our congressmen, senators, saying all of the things that we really find to be reprehensible about this administration. And we'll be here demonstrating when he's here.
The Federal Aviation Administration will close the airspace around Anchorage. Traffic delays are also expected, with details on which roads will be closed to be announced in the coming days. For security reasons, state officials and the local mayor have not yet revealed the venue for the summit, and the White House has declined to comment on the matter. Historically, such high-level meetings have been held at airports or military bases. Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson and Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport are considered the most suitable locations.
President Donald Trump announced he's deploying 800 National Guard troops to Washington, D.C. and placing the city's police force under federal control, despite 2024's violent crime hitting a 30-year low. He claims the escalating lawlessness justifies expanding executive powers in Democratic-run cities, and he's eyeing Washington. Hundreds of federal agents from the FBI, ICE, DEA, ATF are already on the ground, and Trump hasn't ruled out using the military if needed. Attorney General Pam Bondi will take over managing the city's police department. Critics say he's manufacturing a crisis to centralise power.
Person who I thought.
EU foreign ministers have gathered to discuss Europe's role ahead of Friday's meeting between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Over the weekend, a handful of European leaders issued a joint statement welcoming Washington's peace efforts, but said that Europe's security interests must be protected. William Denslow has this report.
The EU's top diplomat Kaja Kallas has stressed that transatlantic unity, support for Ukraine and pressure on Russia are absolutely paramount to see an end to the war and lasting peace, and to stop a Russian aggression anytime in the future. However, there are serious concerns here in the European Union about whether Donald Trump is aligned on any of those principles. There are fears here in Brussels that the EU and European leaders are being sidelined by the president, as evidenced by his meeting on Friday with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin, and what exactly the decisions might be made between the two leaders. Europe's position is very clear. They want to see more support for Ukraine. They also want to see more sanctions on Russia. They also want to ensure that Kyiv has a seat at the table going forward. The mantra from many here in Brussels has been very simple indeed. No decision about Ukraine without Ukraine's presence. They also extend that to European security. No decisions about Europe's long-term security future to be decided without Europe at the table. The feeling is that there can't be concessions made to Russia, really giving a green light that this kind of aggression could be used in the future. That is a major issue that's been discussed by European Union foreign ministers on Monday. I've had a sense of this kind of belief by the Committee of Foreign Affairs of members of the European Parliament. They've come out and said that Russia can't be rewarded for its actions in Ukraine. So they're a sense of Europe's position. They don't want to see any kind of concessions in this war going forward. That is a huge concern, and something that we know that we can expect Friedrich Merz and a number of other European leaders to raise directly with Donald Trump when they have the chance to speak to the US president on Wednesday, just 2 days before his sit-down meeting with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin. William Denslow, A News, Brussels.
The full text of the agreement on establishment of peace and interstate relations between Azerbaijan and Armenia has been made public. It sets out the principles for ending decades of conflict, with the final signing still ahead.
The long-awaited agreement on establishment of peace and interstate relations between the Republic of Azerbaijan and the Republic of Armenia has now been published. The work on the draft text was finalised on the 13th of March 2022. After being formally initialled on the 8th of August, as confirmed by the joint declaration signed on the same day, the agreement was made public on the 11th of August. The full treaty contains 17 detailed articles. However, it has not yet been signed and ratified. Armenia still needs to eliminate territorial claims towards Azerbaijan in order to remove the last remaining obstacle. The first 5 articles set the foundation with 5 key principles: mutual recognition of sovereignty and territorial integrity based on Soviet-era borders, renunciation of all current and future territorial claims, a pledge to refrain from the use or threat of force, respect for non-interference in internal affairs, and the establishment of diplomatic relations after ratification. Article 1 legally confirms that borders inherited from the former Soviet republics are now internationally recognized state boundaries, setting a firm baseline since 1991. Article 2 explicitly prohibits territorial claims now or in the future, and commits both sides not to support any acts threatening each other's territorial integrity or political unity. Articles 3 and 4 ban the use or threat of force and interference in internal affairs. These are critical given the Russian military presence in Armenia, which may complicate implementation. They also forbid any third party from using either country's territory to threaten the other. Article 5 provides for the establishment of formal diplomatic relations once the treaty is ratified, marking an important step towards normalization. Article 6 elaborates that delimitation and demarcation of borders will be done by joint commissions, but no specific maps have been agreed, meaning this will be a long and complex process. Article 7 bans any third-party military presence along the border, directly impacting the EU monitoring mission in Armenia. Armenia will need to negotiate with the EU about the future of this mission. Article 15 complements this by requiring withdrawal of existing interstate claims and banning new ones, including those initiated by third parties such as NGOs. These 2 articles emphasize keeping the peace process strictly bilateral and free from outside interference. Article 8 commits both sides to combat intolerance, hatred, and terrorism within their territories. Article 9 calls for cooperation to investigate and resolve cases of missing persons and enforced disappearances, a major demand from Azerbaijan following the First Karabakh War. Article 10 encourages cooperation in economic, transit, environmental, humanitarian, and cultural fields. Article 11 clarifies that existing international treaties with third countries remain valid so long as they do not conflict with this agreement. Article 12 prevents either party from using domestic laws to evade treaty obligations and, under the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, obliges both to avoid actions that undermine the agreement before it formally enters into force. This creates a legal obligation by virtue of the treaty having already been initialled. Article 13 establishes a bilateral commission to oversee implementation, while Article 14 provides mechanisms for peaceful dispute resolution. Articles 16 and 17 cover ratification procedures and UN registration. In summary, while the treaty has been initialled, it has not yet been signed. Before signing, Armenia must remove its territorial claim, a step that is unlikely to occur before 2026.
Previously, we spoke to Leon Cook, former Director of Communications at the European Azerbaijan Society and founder of Atticus Partners, regarding the outcome of the Washington Peace Summit.
I guess my question would be, is this the beginning of the end or the end of the beginning? A lot of things still need to happen in the runway now between, I would say, the parliamentary elections in Yerevan in June of next year. Pashinyan, who many think was lucky to keep his job, has now got a very short runway to make this stick with the hardliners, with the diaspora, with elements of the opposition. And so the articles which have just been articulated by Orhan about how this cannot or should not be unwound, at the end of the day, it does still require two sides to ratify this agreement and progress it. This is a preliminary signing of a peace agreement, but it is very, very historic because the Minsk group, the OSCE, with both sides now calling for its disbanding, couldn't solve this problem in 30 years. Azerbaijan and Armenia have negotiated on this text and this agreement in 2 years and have managed to do it on their own without also the introduction and help and assistance of the European Union, who offered it, I might add. And therefore, there is absolutely hope for a long-standing peace agreement. I think there is economic benefit for both sides regionally. And you might ask me next why the United States is getting itself involved in this. One, because I think Donald Trump understands that if he comes in at the last minute, he can wrap a ribbon around it and say that he has put this deal together. But at the end of the day, the United States has a commercial interest, and the preliminary agreement signed between Exxon and Sokar a number of months ago is evidence of that. They understand that there is an opportunity here, and the body language between President Aliyev and President Trump in Washington spoke volumes.
Georgia will complete the first phase of construction of the deep-water Anaklia port on the Black Sea coast by 2029, according to Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kopakidze. Once completed, the port will be able to handle 600,000 containers annually.
Construction of the Anaklia deep-sea port in western Georgia is moving ahead as planned. Marine construction work by Belgian firm Jean Denul covering harbor deepening, breakwater design and temporary pier construction is currently underway. Construction of the deepwater port started in September 2024, with marine work scheduled to be finished within 3 years. Mobilization, the project studies and detailed designs are now in their final stages. So by October 2025, the temporary berth will be in place. According to the ministry, the design phase included geophysical, geological and engineering studies of the seabed at the construction on site, as well as the wave modeling for the breakwaters. This process resulted in an updated environmental impact assessment and expert review and mostly the basic project plan. The Georgian government decided to continue construction of the Anaklia port on the conditions that the state will retain 51% stake. The tender of selecting private partner resulted in a single bid from the Chinese-Singaporean consortium, which was declared as the winner. Georgian government is expected to sign the deal with consortium in summer 2025, with active negotiations currently underway. The Prime Minister, Irakli Kopakidze, has said that the first stage of the project will be completed no longer than 2029. The initial stage, with total investment of $600 million investment, will give the port opportunity to handle more than 600,000 containers annually as soon as being completed. It's Nini Nikolaishvili, reporting from Tbilisi, A News.
Turkey's Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan says ending conflicts in the region is the country's diplomatic priority. Speaking in Aksaray, he highlighted Ankara's role as a stabilizing force for neighboring states and its self-reliance in security matters. Fidan pointed to Turkey's broad diplomatic reach from the Middle East to Africa, the Balkans and the Asia-Pacific, focusing on a strong defence industry and counter-terrorism. He said this experience benefits other nations, citing work in Somalia as an example. Hundreds of people have been evacuated from their homes in northwestern Türkiye as a fast-moving wildfire tears through Çanakkale, destroying homes and forcing the closure of key transport routes.
Hundreds of residents were forced to evacuate their homes on Monday as a wildfire swept through forested areas near the centre of Turkey's northwestern Çanakkale province. ablaze, fanned by strong winds and high temperatures, destroyed dozens of houses and vehicles, according to local authorities. Interior Minister reported that 187 people were rescued by sea and 161 by land. People had to flee a university campus, military facilities, and residential neighborhoods. More than 700 personnel, supported by planes, helicopters, and firefighting vehicles, were deployed to battle the flames. Helicopters were seen scooping water from the Dardanelles Strait to douse hotspots, while police water cannons tackled blazes that reached residential buildings. The city's airport, a section of the highway, and parts of the strait were temporarily closed. The Turkish Meteorological Service reported temperatures of 33 degrees Celsius and wind speeds of up to 66 kilometers per hour, conditions that fueled the spread of the fire.
Afghanistan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs is firing back at a new United Nations report that paints a negative picture of returning refugees and for women working with aid agencies. A statement by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs calls the UN findings baseless and warns of possible legal action. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has more from Kabul.
The United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan says some Afghans returning from Iran and Pakistan have faced torture and security threats. The Taliban rejects that, arguing the report relies on testimonies from just 49 people and ignores what it describes as the positive experiences of millions of others. The same report also confirms for the first time that Afghan women working for the UN and other agencies have received death threats from unidentified individuals. The Taliban insists its members are not involved and says an Interior Ministry investigation is underway. Though spokesman Abdul Mateen Khane told the Associated Press that no such threats exists. The UN says threats have forced it to adopt emergency safety measures. This comes against the backdrop of sweeping restrictions on women, such as bans on most jobs, including with NGOs and the UN, mandatory chador dress codes, and outright denial of access to public spaces. A previous UN report found that at least 1.4 million girls have been deliberately deprived of education under Taliban rule. Aid agencies say these policies have crippled humanitarian work. Allegation Kabul denies. Tamim Bahis reporting for A News from Kabul, Afghanistan.
Kazakhstan's city of Aktau has hosted the first Urka International Short Film Festival last week. It brought together talent from across the Turkic world and showcased a total of 51 animated movies.
The International Organization of Turkic Culture hosted the Urka International Short Film Festival in Aktau, the 2025 Turkic World Capital of Culture. The festival gathered filmmakers, young animators and cinema students from across the Turkic world, with participants from Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Türkiye, Turkmenistan and Tatarstan. The programme featured screenings, panel discussions and cultural performances, highlighting how cinema and animation can preserve and promote the shared heritage of Turkic nations. Exhibitions and displays showcase traditional art, photography and literature alongside the film events. The name Urka refers to a guiding star cluster in Turkic mythology, long regarded as a cultural symbol among Turkic peoples. The three-day celebration concluded with an award ceremony honouring outstanding works from across the region.
That's all from us from Baku for now. Stay with us on A News for more updates and have a wonderful morning.